Yeah. So I think that one of the things that's important with a lot of team structure is the multidisciplined approach. So here's a couple of things. One is that you realize that generally in any team, for that team to be successful, it's going to have a balance of skills and experience in it, right? And it's just like, if I had a music ensemble, I'm not going to have five bass players in a quintet, right? Like it just doesn't really make sense. I need different disciplines to come to the table. And so generally, if I was going to build any kind of a product, I'm going to have at least someone who knows a lot about the implementation and the building, someone who has like sort of an engineering kind of a mindset, and at least someone who has a mindset about the experience and the design of it, and someone who is going to look at the needs of the customer or the actual problem and whether or not we're building the right thing. And so that person might be sort of more business oriented. So I think that's one thing, is to actually have that those multiple disciplines. But another thing that I think is extremely powerful is the idea that that is decoupled from the leadership, what you might call the project management of who might lead a project. So in Shopify, for example, we had this concept of champions, project champions. A project champion is someone who sort of runs the project. And it's important to understand that that person is not someone who has the answers to everything. They don't make all the decisions, but what they do is they make sure all the decisions get made. They facilitate, right? And if they don't know something, they will find out, right? And they will, find out who has the answer. But the idea is that that ability to do that role is totally separate from the discipline of the person, right? Like, and one interesting way to look at it too is that if you look at a project and you say, okay, what's the greatest risk on this project? Perhaps it's a technical risk of building it. Maybe that's going to be the hardest thing, or maybe the hardest thing is going to be coming up with this fantastic experience that people will love, or maybe the problem is going to be trying to figure out exactly how to scope the problem, right, and bring it to market and so forth. And so perhaps one way to go is to say, okay, well, if we think the technical problem is the greatest risk, that perhaps we would actually have the person who is in that discipline that would actually lead the project. Now that's one way to go, but of course, people who run projects, and so traditionally in most organizations they would have a project manager, right? It's a professional role of someone who organizes the project. And what's interesting is often those people they're not actually doing anything on the project other than organizing, right? And so there often is this tension that is created, right? Oh, well, this person is telling us how to do stuff and running stuff, but they don't actually have any skin in the game because they're not actually building parts of it, right? So the idea that you would have someone leading the project who actually is one of the people working on building the thing, I think is a very powerful thing. And it's just, and if you go back actually sort of to the jazz analogy, you don't typically have anyone who leads a jazz group who is just out the front and just waving their hands. It's always someone who's in the group who's actually part of the process of actually building the performance. And so I think that's a really important thing.
Like a credibility thing with
Yeah.
team members.
Yeah, and I think also a insider knowledge almost, right? Like they really know what's going on. You don't have that abstraction, right? And sometimes when I worked in some other organizations in the past, especially bigger organizations, you see people who get shuffled around in organizations who are managers of whatever. And last week they were the manager of something, and now they're the manager of something else. And they come to manage this thing, and they actually have no background experience, knowledge, anything about the domain at all. But supposedly because they're a manager, it means that they can manage the thing. And sometimes that doesn't really go very well, right? So I think that that's a really powerful thing, is to think about leadership in a sort of a different kind of a way.
Mm.